What what can parties do to mitigate the risk of international contract disputes?
I think parties should actually start preparations all the way at the beginning. So, at the negotiation phase of the contract, they should pay attention to what they are agreeing to. Quite often, parties are very enthusiastic when a relationship is starting. They don't look at exactly what they're agreeing to. They sign up on terms they don't fully understand, and that's when the trouble starts. The second is after they've signed a contract. It's always important to actually look at what the contract says and apply it. I mean, I find quite often, for example, in construction contracts, the contract has very specific provisions on how notice should be given, how requests for variation should be given, but quite often parties forget to do this. And then finally, of course, if and when the dispute comes, if you've had a bad contract, you've not followed it, you'll be in a very weak position. So it's always best if you understand what you're signing up for and then comply with it, because international contracts, especially with sophisticated counterparties, you're likely to be held up to what you bargained for.
Okay. Are you satisfied with the straitjacket DR processes like mediation, conciliation, arbitration, or you feel there is a lot of scope of hybrid methods like MED-ARB or ARB, MED-ARB, etc.?
So actually, I mean, coming from Singapore, I'm familiar with all the different mechanisms. We use a lot of arbitration. We use a lot of mediation. My own practice involves disputes in the High Court and arbitration. But in Singapore, the Singapore High Courts generally recommend all disputes go for mediation. So in almost all my cases, I would always recommend to clients to give mediation a try. In some contracts, I've seen met-up clauses used as well. And I think it always makes sense because, if you can resolve a dispute by mediation, you'll save yourself a lot of costs. And, in my experience, a little under half the disputes actually do get resolved by mediation. And even for those other half that don't get resolved, I think it still makes sense to try because usually mediation is 1 day, maybe 2 days. And that can save you, weeks in court or, a long wait for your arbitration.
Okay. How India would be benefited after signing the recently held Singapore Convention on Mediation?
Well, what the Singapore Convention on Mediation does is that it gives you a window of time in which arbitrations can be sent for mediation, and that mediation agreement will then be able to be enforced directly in the courts of the signatory countries. Because one of the weaknesses of mediation is because it's consensual, what you'll have at the end is a contractual agreement, which you then have to go through the process for enforcing contracts. But this will give a mediated settlement agreement a lot more bite. And in that sense, you'll get a lot of the benefits of an arbitral award without having to go through all the pain. The only catch, of course, is that you have to agree on it.
And my last question to you is your experience at TIIDM.
I think it's been a good experience so far. I mean, the first two panels, I've heard a lot of the views of the General Counsel, and they're clearly very experienced dealing with international contracts. And I think it's been a good experience for me to understand the needs of the Council here as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
So where will this be?